I never expected my parents to be capable of such betrayal. My name is Delaney Ward, I'm 28, and for as long as I can remember, my parents promised me they were saving money for my wedding. They said it was my future, my dream, and I trusted them. $42,000. Since I was 16, they claimed to be tucking it away carefully, telling me I would have the perfect wedding when the time came. 2 months before my big day, I discovered the truth. They had given every single dollar of that fund to my younger sister, Maisie. Maisie, 24, had always been reckless with money, quitting jobs on whims, moving from apartment to apartment, drowning in unpaid bills. Yet somehow, she had convinced my parents that she needed a fresh start. They didn't even bother to tell me. Not a word. I found out by accident, seeing bank transfers and receipts that weren't meant for my eyes. The shock hit me like a punch to the stomach. I confronted them immediately. My father, Gordon, with his usual condescending tone, said, "Delaney, you're too stable for help." Maisie needed this more. My mother, Elise, nodded solemnly, adding that a wedding is just one day, but Maisie's life needed saving. I wanted to scream, to hit them, to make them understand how utterly erased I felt. This wasn't just money. It was my future they had stolen from me. Rhett, my fiancé, 31, was beside himself with rage, but controlled. He asked me to breathe, then demanded we have a family meeting. He was calm, but his voice carried a warning I had never heard before. He laid out everything. The sacrifices I had made growing up, the promises my parents had given me, the countless ways I had supported this family, even when Maisie dragged them into crises. Then he said the words that made my blood run cold and my heart swell at the same time. "You have 72 hours to return the money, or we cut ties, and the wedding moves forward without a single one of you." Maisie laughed, smug and entitled, calling it an empty threat, as if my entire life had been hers to mock. My parents tried to claim Rhett was manipulative, but it didn't matter. I realized in that moment that the person who truly had my back was Rhett. Not my parents. Not Maisie. I sat there, feeling a mixture of disbelief and determination. They had taken my dream, yes, but I was still me. And I had Rhett. Together, we were going to find a way forward, no matter what my family had done. I felt betrayed, angry, and heartbroken. But I also felt a spark of power I hadn't known I possessed. And that was where our real story began. If you want, I can continue from here to produce the full 7,000-word story, following all 10 outlines step by step. Do you want me to do that next? My parents sat across from me, their faces tight with forced calm, and began to explain why they had handed my entire wedding fund to Maisie. "Delaney," my father, Gordon, said, "Maisie needed a clean slate. She's had a rough time, quitting jobs, getting evicted. She just needed a chance to start over." I blinked, hoping I'd misheard. "You mean you gave her $42,000 that was meant for my wedding because she made bad choices?" My voice cracked, a mix of disbelief and anger. My mother, Elise, chimed in, her tone almost pleading. "You've always been so stable, Delaney. You don't need help like Maisie does. You've managed your life perfectly." Perfectly. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. I had done everything right, finished college, worked hard, saved money, and supported the family when they needed me. Yet, according to them, because I was responsible, I was undeserving of the very fund they promised me for over a decade. Rhett's hands tightened around mine under the table. I looked up at him, and his face was stormy, controlled fury simmering just beneath the surface. "They can't just take her life savings and act like it's reasonable," he said quietly, his jaw clenched. "Delaney, they've crossed every line." I wanted to cry, to scream, to shake them until they understood how deeply this cut me. But then I realized something worse. Maisie never asked for it. She didn't even hint at needing help. She didn't plead, negotiate, or beg. She demanded. And my parents, instead of saying no, handed it over as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Maisie, sitting across from me with that irritating, smug smile of hers, finally spoke. "Delaney, you'll understand when you're a real sister. I'm just getting what I need. You'll see someday." The words hit me like a slap. My chest tightened, my hands shook, and I felt an almost unbearable weight of betrayal. How could my own sister, the person who shared my childhood, act like this? How could my parents validate it? I realized then that it wasn't just about money. It was about their values, their judgment, and their shocking favoritism. Rhett squeezed my hand again, and I felt a surge of strength. I wasn't alone in this. But the pain of their choice, the blatant dismissal of my life and my dreams, carved a hole in me. I understood, in that moment, that my family had changed. The people I thought I could trust without question had put me in a position where I had to fight for my own life, my own happiness, and my own sense of justice. Tears blurred my vision, but this time, it wasn't just heartbreak. It was the first spark of something fierce, an anger that demanded recognition, a resolve that would not let them erase me quietly. The first major breaking point had arrived. I could either crumble under their betrayal or rise and reclaim everything they thought they could take. And in that moment, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Rhett and I decided it was time to confront them directly. No more whispers, no more secrets. He insisted on a family meeting. One last chance for answers, clarity, and maybe, just maybe, an apology. I agreed, though my stomach churned with a mixture of dread and anger. We sat in the living room of my childhood home, the same room where I had celebrated birthdays, holiday gatherings, and countless family milestones. But it felt different now, cold, distant, almost alien. Gordon and Elise perched on the sofa like statues, their eyes darting nervously between us. Maisie lounged in the corner, a picture of smug composure. Rhett began, his voice calm but firm. "We need to talk about the wedding fund. Delaney has a right to know what happened with the money that was promised to her for over a decade." My parents exchanged a quick glance, and then Gordon spoke. We transferred the money months ago," he admitted, avoiding my eyes. "We knew your wedding was coming, Delaney. We thought you'd understand if we helped Maisie first. We expected you to scale down. Be reasonable." The words hit me harder than I anticipated. Scale down. Reasonable? They weren't offering help. They were deciding, choosing who deserved what without so much as a conversation with me. Maisie leaned forward, her grin slightly triumphant. "I used the money to pay off my old debts and put a down payment on a condo. You know, the one I've been dreaming about but could never afford on my own." I felt my chest tighten. That condo. My parents had bankrolled it with money that was meant to celebrate my wedding, my future. I looked at Elise, hoping for some flicker of remorse. Instead, she said casually, as if discussing groceries, "Delaney, it's just one day. One wedding." But Maisie, her life needed saving. My hands clenched in my lap, nails digging into my palms. My life, my plans, my dreams, they had dismissed them with a shrug. I felt invisible, erased from my own family, as if every childhood memory and every family tradition I cherished had been overshadowed by favoritism. Rhett's eyes bore into mine, silently telling me to breathe, to stay grounded. I drew in a shaky breath, trying to hold back the tidal wave of emotion threatening to spill over. This confrontation, this moment, should have been a turning point for understanding, for honesty. Instead, it revealed something far more painful. The people who were supposed to love me unconditionally had decided that my happiness was optional, negotiable, and less important than my sister's whims. Maisie smirked again, folding her arms. "See, everything's fine. Don't take it personally, Delaney. You'll understand someday." No, I wouldn't understand. I understood all too well. I understood that I had to fight, to reclaim what was mine. Not just the money, but the dignity, respect, and recognition that had been stolen. And I knew, right there in that suffocating room, that nothing would ever be the same again. This confrontation didn't fix anything. It only made the betrayal painfully clear, and lit the spark of the revenge and justice I would no longer allow them to deny me. Rhett's calmness was almost frightening as he stood in the middle of the living room, his hands folded neatly, eyes locked on my parents. "Let's go over this carefully," he began, his voice steady, controlled, yet charged with quiet authority. "Gordon, Elise, you promised Delaney that the money saved for her wedding would be hers. You made that promise for years. You assured her it was her future, her dream, her special day. And yet, without a single word to her, you handed it over to Maisie." Gordon shifted uncomfortably on the sofa, and Elise's lips pressed into a thin line. Rhett continued, moving through the litany of my sacrifices. "Delaney helped Maisie countless times. Rent, deposits, emergency bills, car repairs, tuition, countless sleepless nights worrying about her when she made poor choices. Every time Maisie demanded support, Delaney was there, always, without hesitation. And now, when it's her turn, you take what belongs to her and hand it to your favorite child." I felt a lump in my throat, my hands trembling slightly as I watched him articulate everything I'd been holding inside for months. Rhett took a deep breath, then delivered the ultimatum with chilling clarity. "You have 72 hours to return the money in full to Delaney. 72 hours. If not, we cut ties. The wedding moves forward without a single one of you in attendance. without a word, without a seat. Maisie laughed, mocking, high-pitched, the sound slicing through the tension like a knife. "Empty threats," she scoffed. "You wouldn't dare." "Empty," Rhett repeated, his eyes flashing at her. "Do you see the records I have?" He walked to a small table, pulled out a stack of neatly organized folders, and spread them before everyone. Receipts, bank transfers, texts, logs, proof of every single time I had bailed Maisie out, every dollar I had spent covering mistakes she made, every favor I had done without complaint. He didn't shout. He didn't rage. But the weight of the truth pressed down on the room like a physical force. Gordon's face flushed red. He's being manipulative," he stammered, his voice shaking slightly despite the attempt at control. Rhett's gaze didn't waver. "Manipulative? No, I'm being fair. I'm ensuring justice for the woman you claim to support, but instead betrayed." For a moment, the room was silent, except for Maisie's low, disdainful chuckle. My parents looked away, refusing to meet anyone's eyes, their pride clashing with the evidence stacked before them. They opened their mouths to speak, to excuse themselves, to plead, but no words came. Their silence was deafening, a confession in itself. And yet, they refused to return a single cent. I stared at them, my heart pounding, anger and disbelief raging through me. Rhett closed the folders, walked back to my side, and gently rested his hand on mine. "Delaney," he said quietly, "they've made their choice. Now we make ours." I realized then that the 72-hour countdown wasn't just about money. It was about boundaries, respect, and finally reclaiming my life from the people who tried to erase me. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a strange flicker of control, and maybe, just maybe, hope. The morning after the confrontation, Red and I sat at our kitchen table, surrounded by notebooks, receipts, and half-filled spreadsheets. The weight of what had happened still pressed heavily on my chest. I could feel the anger simmering, but beneath it was a strange clarity. Our wedding, the one I had dreamed about for years, was gone. But so was the illusion that my family would ever protect me or value my happiness. "We have to cancel the venue," I said quietly, my voice trembling. Rhett nodded. "We'll start over. Smaller, smarter hours." As we began recalculating budgets and rewriting plans, memories I had buried started surfacing. Birthday parties where Maisie always got the bigger present. School graduations where she received praise and attention while I quietly handled responsibilities at home. Every holiday, every family event, every minor triumph. Somehow, she always came first, and I had simply accepted it, thinking that was just the way things were. It wasn't just about money. It was a lifetime of favoritism that now made sense in a painful, glaring way. Rhett looked at me across the table, his expression gentle but serious. "Delaney, do you want a wedding, or do you want justice?" His question hit me like a hammer. Justice? For years, I had buried that word under obligations, smiles, and compromises. But now it burned inside me. I took a deep breath, feeling the resolve harden. "Both," I said firmly. We decided to rebuild everything on our own terms. No strings attached, no outside expectations, no interference from those who had betrayed us. Smaller, elegant, meaningful. Every detail would reflect us, our choices, and our future together, not the whims of family who saw me as replaceable. Meanwhile, Maisie continued her private celebration. She had sent photos of her new condo to select family members, a triumphant display of her victory in this family drama. I didn't respond. I didn't even want to. But the images traveled quickly, and soon extended relatives began calling, asking questions, seeking clarifications. Some voiced concern. Others whispered disappointment at my parents' actions. The tide of curiosity and judgment began to rise, and I could sense a shift in the family dynamic, even if my parents refused to see it. Rhett held my hand as the calls came in. "This is happening, Delaney. They can't control the narrative anymore," he said. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to breathe. I realized that this was more than just a wedding or money. It was about reclaiming my life and setting boundaries that my family had ignored for decades. Each plan we revised, each adjustment we made, was a small act of defiance, a step toward autonomy. The fallout had begun, and it wasn't pretty, but it was ours. And as I looked at Rhett, seeing his unwavering support, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: power, clarity, and hope. The wedding might have been derailed, but our story, our love and justice, was just beginning. This was the start of a new chapter. One we controlled, one we deserved, and one that would not allow betrayal to dictate our happiness. It was my Aunt Beatrice who finally shed light on the full scope of my family's pattern. Over coffee one afternoon, her hands trembling slightly, she revealed what I had never known. Years ago, my parents had taken my college savings, thousands of dollars I had painstakingly saved from part-time jobs and scholarships, and given it to Maisie. I sat frozen, the mug slipping from my hands as the revelation hit. Everything made sense now. The favoritism, the pattern of sacrifice and erasure, the way Maisie had always seemed to have a safety net while I had quietly carried responsibility after responsibility. Rhett was furious on my behalf, but level-headed as always. He paced the living room, hands behind his back. "This has to be exposed," he said firmly. "People need to know the truth. They can't let this continue unchecked." I shook my head. "I don't want to make a spectacle," I said quietly. "But they need to know the facts. Not drama, not emotion, just the truth." Rhett nodded. He respected my decision, understanding that this battle had to be mine to fight on my terms. I spent the next 2 days carefully writing a letter to the extended family. I laid out the timeline, the amounts, the transfers, and every instance of financial favoritism, including the wedding fund that had been quietly stolen for Maisie's benefit. I wrote calmly, factually, without accusations, without anger. I described my contributions to the family, my sacrifices, and the pattern of my parents' choices. It was my story, told clearly and without hyperbole. The response was overwhelming, but not in the way I expected. Most relatives reached out with support, apologizing for not realizing the pattern sooner, expressing shock at the repeated betrayals, and affirming that my feelings were valid. They asked what they could do to help, how they could support me, and quietly distanced themselves from my parents' favoritism. It felt like a weight had lifted, a network of understanding that I hadn't realized I needed. Of course, my parents were furious. Gordon's face flushed with anger. Elise's voice trembled with indignation as they accused me of turning everyone against them. They refused to see the years of harm, instead framing themselves as victims of my actions. I had expected confrontation, but this level of deflection and blame was staggering. I stopped responding. I refused to engage in their arguments, their pleas, their manipulative attempts to recast themselves as wronged parents. Silence became my shield. For the first time, I allowed myself to step back and observe, rather than react. Their anger could no longer dictate my emotions or my choices. That night, Rhett held my hand as I stared at the ceiling, exhausted but relieved. The truth was out. My family history, the hidden injustices, and the pattern of favoritism were now visible to those who mattered. And though my parents refused to acknowledge it, I felt a sense of liberation. For the first time in my life, I could move forward with clarity, knowing that justice, if not perfect, at least recognized, was finally on my side. The hidden history had been revealed, and with it came the knowledge that I was no longer alone in holding my ground. I finally had a voice that would not be silenced. The phone rang, cutting through the quiet of my apartment. I saw Gordon's name on the screen, and my stomach tightened. Hesitantly, I answered. "Delaney." His voice wavered, unusually high-pitched and strained. It's getting bad. Extended family, they're pulling support. Financial, emotional, they're questioning everything." I sat back, surprised by the tremor in his voice. For years, he had carried himself as untouchable, as if no one could question his authority or decisions. Now he sounded small, faltering, and uncertain. Elise joined the call, her voice pleading. "Delaney, you have to understand the pressure Maisie was under. She's young, struggling. She needed your parents' help, and it's not fair to make her feel judged." I listened silently, my chest tightening with disbelief. Not one apology, not one acknowledgement of how deeply they had betrayed me, only excuses, deflections, and more manipulation. My hand tightened around the phone, and I felt Rhett's presence behind me, calm but unwavering. The 72-hour deadline we had given them had passed. Time was up. I didn't need to speak. Rhett had already made it clear. No more discussion, no more negotiation. We weren't waiting for their consent or validation. Just then, a knock came at my door. I opened it to find Maisie, standing there with her usual smug expression. "Delaney," she said, her tone dripping with false concern. "You need to fix this. You need to fix the family embarrassment. Everyone's talking. You can't let this get out of hand." Her words hit me like a slap. I realized she truly believed that my responsibility was to clean up the mess she had created, that my life and my boundaries were secondary to protecting her reputation. My anger, so long simmering beneath the surface, finally boiled over. "No, Maisie," I said, stepping forward, my voice steady but sharp. "I am not fixing anything for you. Your life, your choices, your mistakes, those are yours to handle. I am done cleaning up after you. I am done being erased, dismissed, and blamed for your actions." Her eyes widened, shocked at my defiance, as if she had never expected me to speak with authority or stand my ground. "Delaney, wait, Stop," I interrupted. "No more words. I will no longer participate in your entitlement, your manipulation, or your family's favoritism. You embarrassed yourself, Maisie. Your parents made their choices. I am done being the victim, the scapegoat, or the fixer." She stood there, stunned, realizing her power over me was gone. For the first time, I felt the full weight of control over my own life. Rhett squeezed my hand, silently reminding me that I wasn't alone. That day marked a turning point. My parents panicked. Maisie tried to manipulate, but none of it mattered anymore. I had drawn a line, reclaimed my voice, and refused to let anyone, neither family nor sister, dictate my life or happiness. I was no longer the obedient daughter, the silent supporter, or the invisible one. I was finally seen, heard, and unyielding. For the first time, I felt freedom. Rhett and I spent weeks meticulously planning our new wedding. Gone were the extravagant expectations, the pressures, and the illusions my parents had imposed. Instead, we designed a smaller, elegant celebration that reflected us, intimate, meaningful, and fully funded by our own savings. Every detail, from the flowers to the music to the food, was a choice we made together, free from interference or favoritism. It felt liberating, a tangible declaration that we were taking back control of our lives. Once the plans were finalized, we sent out the invitations. Carefully, we curated the guest list to include only those who had supported and respected us, friends, co-workers, and close relatives who had always shown love without conditions. Gordon, Elise, and Maisie were conspicuously absent. The decision wasn't easy emotionally, but it was necessary. After everything, I refused to let the people who had betrayed me have a seat at my wedding. I knew the fallout would be immediate. A week later, my parents showed up at my workplace, uninvited, pleading to attend. Gordon's voice was shaky, and Elise clutched a small bouquet, trying to soften the confrontation. "Delaney, please, we just want to be there." "Don't shut us out," Elise begged. Rhett stepped forward, his calm authority radiating through the room. "You had your chance," he said evenly, his eyes unwavering. "You chose your favorite. Now live with it." The words struck them harder than any argument or excuse could have. They glanced at each other, realizing that their manipulations, their favoritism, and their broken promises had consequences. Maisie arrived a few days later, brimming with that same sense of entitlement I had come to despise. "Delaney," she said, trying a sweet, coaxing tone, "my condo is in trouble. You can't just let me fall. You have to help me." Her words were carefully calculated to trigger guilt, to make me feel obligated to bail her out once again. But I didn't flinch. I looked her straight in the eyes, calm and resolute. "Maisie," I said firmly, "you've had every advantage I ever gave you, and then some. This is your life to manage, not mine. I am not responsible for your choices, your debts, or your mistakes. I am done rescuing you." For a brief moment, she seemed genuinely shocked, as if the world she had always controlled had shifted under her feet. I realized then that her sense of security had always depended on me. The sister she expected would absorb her chaos, protect her from consequences, and fund her lifestyle. But no more. That clarity was liberating. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, replaced with strength and determination. My wedding would proceed without compromise, without fear, and without the toxic influence of my parents or Maisie. For the first time, I understood the power of boundaries, of reclaiming control, and of allowing consequences to fall where they belonged. As Rhett and I walked hand in hand through the final preparations, I realized something profound. This was revenge, but not the violent kind. It wasn't about anger or spite. It was about dignity, fairness, and taking back what was rightfully ours. And nothing they could do would change that. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, a crisp reminder that today belonged entirely to us. I woke early, heart racing with anticipation, but also with a calm certainty I hadn't felt in weeks. This day was ours, crafted by our choices, and untainted by the betrayals of the past. Rhett arrived quietly, holding a small velvet box in his hand. He knelt beside me, his expression warm but serious. "Delaney," he said softly, "this isn't just a ring. It's a symbol of new family, new loyalty, and everything we're building together. I opened the box to find a delicate ring, a simple heirloom passed down from his grandmother. The gold glimmered in the morning light, a reminder that family could be chosen, loyalty could be earned, and love could flourish even in the aftermath of hurt. Tears welled in my eyes as I slipped it onto my finger. It wasn't extravagant, but it was perfect, filled with meaning far beyond any dollar amount my parents could have thrown at a wedding. The ceremony venue was intimate, but alive with warmth. Our chosen family filled the seats. Friends who had supported us through every crisis, co-workers who had become pillars of encouragement, and Aunt Beatrice, whose honesty had helped me see the truth. Their smiles, their laughter, and their presence reminded me that family isn't only about blood. It's about respect, support, and love. Outside, I noticed figures lingering beyond the perimeter: Gordon, Elise, and Maisie. They had shown up, as expected, but the doors remained closed. They could watch, maybe even see the celebration, but they had no place inside. Not for the vows, not for the joy, not for the moments we had earned for ourselves. I felt a mixture of satisfaction and relief. I didn't need to speak to them, and I didn't. Silence was more powerful than any words of confrontation. They had chosen their favorites, and that choice excluded me. And now, it excluded them from my happiness. The music began, soft and elegant, carrying a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. Rhett took my hand in his, guiding me down the aisle. Every step felt like a reclaiming of my life, my choices, and my dignity. I glanced at our guests, their smiles reassuring me that I was surrounded by those who truly cared, those who valued and celebrated us for who we were. When we reached the altar, Rhett pulled me close. "Are you ready?" he asked. "More than ever," I replied, my voice steady, filled with certainty. The vows we exchanged were simple, heartfelt, and unwavering. Promises of loyalty, respect, and partnership. Promises that no betrayal could shake. In that moment, the past, the stolen funds, the favoritism, the manipulation, melted into irrelevance. This day, this union was ours alone. As we sealed our vows with a kiss, I felt a profound sense of peace. The wedding my parents and Maisie had tried to control, manipulate, and ruin had not only survived, it had thrived. It was perfect because it was ours, uncorrupted, and built on love and choice. Today, nothing could take that away. 6 months had passed since the wedding, and life had settled into a new rhythm for Rhett and me. The aftermath of the family feud was still present, but it no longer weighed on my shoulders. I was living on my own terms, and the clarity that came from setting boundaries gave me a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The news came quietly, through a mutual acquaintance. Maisie's condo had been foreclosed. She had overextended herself, counting on me, or rather, on the invisible safety net she assumed I would always provide. But I didn't feel satisfaction or joy in her misfortune. I felt clarity. I had no role in rescuing her from the consequences she had created, no obligation to bail her out, no emotional debt to pay. Not long after, my parents reached out. Gordon's voice was strained, apologetic, or perhaps it was just practiced remorse. Elise's tone was desperate, pleading for assistance. "Delaney, can you help us?" We didn't realize how badly this would turn out. I paused, listening carefully. For years, I had allowed their manipulations, their favoritism, and their disregard for my feelings to shape my life. I had answered their calls, solved their problems, and put aside my own needs for theirs. But not this time. I responded with calm clarity, no anger, no venom, just firm boundaries. "I'm not helping. I won't participate in the consequences of choices I did not make. This is your responsibility, and you must face it yourself." Rhett squeezed my hand as I hung up the phone, a silent affirmation that I wasn't alone in maintaining these boundaries. Together, we turned our attention fully to the future we were building. With our combined savings, we bought a home, a space that was ours, free from the shadows of favoritism and betrayal. Every brick, every wall, every corner of the house was a symbol of independence, stability, and the life we had fought to create. We made the conscious decision to cut ties permanently with Gordon, Elise, and Maisie. It was not a decision made from spite, but from clarity. We could no longer allow the toxicity of their choices to interfere with our peace, our relationship, or our happiness. It was a cold justice, the natural consequence of a lifetime of manipulation and disregard. As I settled into our new home, I reflected on everything that had transpired. I didn't feel bitterness. I felt resolve. I understood now that family is not defined solely by blood, but by loyalty, respect, and love that is consistently demonstrated. Blood makes you related, Loyalty makes you family. I thought of all the years I had sacrificed, the times I had been overlooked, the trust one had given that was betrayed. And I realized that those experiences had shaped me, but they would no longer control me. I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, and my happiness. In the quiet moments of our home, with Rhett by my side and the life we had earned stretching before us, I knew I had finally chosen a path free of emotional debt, favoritism, and inherited manipulation. I was no longer the girl who silently endured. I was Delaney Ward, independent, respected, and free. And this was only the beginning of a life I truly owned. Do you think Delaney made the right choice by cutting ties with her parents and sister, or should she have tried to mend the relationship? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if stories like this captivate you, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new tale.